this video, we're going to review what has been learned from Unit 1, Lessons 5 through 9. In order to complete this review, you will need your iControl student workbook and something to write with. If you do not have what you need at this time, please pause the video and press play when you're ready to continue. If you do not need to view all of the lessons in this video, feel free to skip to the lessons you need using the times provided. Before we start Lesson 5, you're going to complete a fun activity that you may have already seen. Turn to handout 5.1 in your workbook. Look at the slide. Each number will flash on the screen for 1 to 2 seconds. As quickly as possible, you'll put a check in the correct box on handout 5.1. You will start by putting a check in the box that reflects the digit that is shown. For example, the number 11 is made of the digit 1, so you would put a check in the 1 box like this. Then the rule will be switched, and you'll need to check the box that corresponds to how many digits are shown. For example, the number 11 has 2 digits, so you would put a check in the 2 box. To review, we'll start by putting a check in the box that reflects the digit that is shown. Please remember the rules. First, record the digit shown on the slide. Let's begin. Rule switch. Now please put a check in the box that reflects the number of digits instead of the name of the digit. Are you ready? Let's go! Now count up your check marks in each box. If you got all of them correct, you would have 1 check in box 1, 2 checks in box 2, and 3 checks in box 3. How did you do? Brains are like muscles. If you exercise your brain, like you just did in the game, you will get better at using strategies that help you solve problems and reach your goals. There are 3 brain skills: working memory, shifting, and impulse control. You use working memory to keep information in mind, which helps you solve a problem or reach a goal. For example, you used your working memory during the number activity to help you remember the rules and apply it to figure out the correct answer each time. The second brain skill is shifting. Shifting is changing the way you think about something. For example, in the number activity, you started off using one rule, then you had to shift and think about the activity in another way to use a different rule. The third brain skill is impulse control. Impulse control is stopping what you do automatically when it might not work very well. For example, during the number activity, you used impulse control to stop and think about making sure you were using the right rule instead of just writing down the first thing that popped into your head. You're going to be training the 3 brain skills in the Brain Training Lab. Your teacher will show you later how to complete the brain training labs and track your progress. Turn to the content questions for Unit 1, Lesson 5 in your iControl student workbook to check your understanding of this lesson. Pause the video while you answer the questions. When you're done, press play. For question 1, if you selected B, you are correct. The 3 brain skills that help us to act with self-control are working memory, shifting, and impulse control. For question 2, if you selected A, you are also correct. When we practice and monitor our brain skills, the pathways in the brain get stronger. Before we start Lesson 6, you're going to do an activity that tests how you can use your working memory to hold and use what you know. Please pause the video and open your workbook to handout 6.1. Press play when you're ready to begin. You'll look at slides with 5 objects on them. You'll get to look at each slide for just 3 seconds. Your job will be to circle as many objects as you can remember after the slide goes blank. Try to remember as many objects as you can while I'm showing the slide. Ready? Go! Ready? Go! Ready? Go! How did you do? Let's check your answers. How many objects did you remember on the first slide? How many objects did you remember on the second slide? How many objects did you remember on the third slide? In Lesson 6, we're going to learn more about working memory, the brain skill you just used to remember and recall the objects on each slide. Working memory is holding information in your head for a short period of time so you can use that information. For example, you use working memory to follow directions that have multiple steps. You remember what you need to do, and when the step is complete, you move to the next step, and so on. Compared to your working memory, long-term memory refers to storing information in your brain, so you can remember it even after long periods of time. For example, your long-term memory helps you remember the name of your fourth grade teacher. Let's do another activity using your working memory. I'm going to read some letters and numbers. You will put them in alphabetical order and then numerical order, first letters, then numbers. For example, if I say D3A1, you would write down AD13. Now pause the video and locate handout 6.2. And when you're ready, press play to begin. In your handout, there are 5 sets of letters and numbers. We will only do the first 3. I will read each set of letters and numbers 2 times and then wait 10 seconds for you to write down your answer. Number 1, G41B. G41B. Number 2, 3C5D. 3C5D. Number 3, DA25B. DA25B. After this activity, I bet you have a better understanding of what working memory is. You have to remember the instructions and use that information to put the letters and numbers in the correct order. Turn to the content questions for Unit 1, Lesson 6 in your iControl student workbook to check for what you have learned in this lesson. Pause the video while you answer the questions. When you're done, press play. For question 1, if you selected A, you are correct. Working memory is holding information in your mind for a short time, so you can use it. For question 2, if you selected D, you are also correct. Remembering division rules as you work through a division math problem is an example of using working memory. In Lesson 7, you'll learn more about shifting. Please turn to handout 7.1. In this activity, there'll be some shapes flashing on the screen, and you'll need to circle either the shape or the color in your workbook according to the rules. Here are the rules. If there is a thick red border around the edge of the slide, circle the name of the shape you see. If there is no border, circle the color of the shape. In order to do this activity, we used a brain skill called shifting, which is about how people can shift their attention from one way of thinking or acting to another way. One typical example of shifting is when a football player changes quickly from playing offense to playing defense if the other team intercepts a pass. Now it's your turn to think of an example when you had to shift the way you were thinking about something to solve a problem, finish something, or even get along with someone. Pause the video and write down your example on a piece of paper or the blank space on your workbook. When you're done, press play to continue. Now let's turn to the content questions for Unit 1, Lesson 7 to check your comprehension. Please pause the video to answer the questions. When you're done, press play. For question 1, if you selected B, you are correct. Shifting is changing the way we think about or react to a situation. For question 2, if you selected D, you are also correct, because counting by 2s and then counting by 3s requires you to shift the way you think. Now, Let's move forward to review Lesson 8, where we'll gain more knowledge about the third brain skill, impulse control. As you remember, impulse control means to stop what you do automatically. This brain skill is very important because being able to resist the impulse to think or do something allows us to take time to think about a situation and how our actions might make it better or worse. Let's talk about how you might use impulse control in your life. I'll walk you through how I might think about the social situation in a role-play perspective. Rayshawn wants to meet some friends to play hoops on Saturday morning, but he has to ask his mom if it's okay. He's been grounded before for not asking, so he goes to ask permission. His mom is on the phone, and he knows he'll get in trouble if he interrupts. But he also doesn't want to miss out on playing ball. He has the impulse to leave instead of waiting to ask for permission. In this scenario, what might be the consequence of giving in to this impulse? Rayshawn could get grounded or could miss something important that mom already had planned for the day. What would be the benefits of not giving in to the impulse? Rayshawn could not get grounded or might get something even better, like a ride from mom. If you're interested in knowing more real-life situations, you can read the role play on handout 8.1 on your own time. Impulse control is the ability to stop a way of thinking or behaving so you can make the best possible choice. If you think about it, I'm sure you can remember some situations in your own life, like Rayshawn's, where you had to use impulse control or maybe failed to use it. Now, let's turn to the content questions for Unit 1, Lesson 8. Please pause the video and take a moment to answer the questions. When you're done, press play. For response 1, if you selected A, you are correct, because impulse control is to stop an action that you do automatically. For response 2, if you selected C, you are also correct. When someone is picking a fight, our automatic response is to argue or fight back. So item C is a good example of using impulse control to stop an action that we automatically do. In our past lessons, we've talked about how using working memory, shifting, and impulse control help us to have better self-control. Now, in Lesson 9, I'm going to give you 3 role plays. I want you to choose the one that is a good example for each brain skill. Which of these would be a good example of using working memory? Learning how to play a new game, remembering your 5th birthday, or thinking about what you want to be when you grow up? If you need to, you can pause the video to think about your answer and press play when you are ready. If you thought learning how to play a new game is a good example of using working memory, you are correct. When you play a new game, you have to keep the rules in mind and use them. In the other choices, you have to remember things from the past or think about the future. Working memory is for things you are doing right now. Which of these would be a good example of using shifting? Choosing a new dance to learn, deciding what to wear to a party, or changing from playing offense to defense in a game? If you need to, you can pause the video to think about your answer and press play when you are ready. Shifting means changing what you do when the situation changes. So if you thought changing from playing offense to defense in a game is a good example of using shifting, you are correct. The other choices are decisions to be made, but nothing about the situation has actually changed. Which of these would be a good example of using impulse control? Hearing the phone ring and answering it, stopping yourself from calling out before raising your hand, or pushing your friend who is really annoying you? If you need to, you can pause the video to think about your answer and press play when you are ready. If you thought raising your hand instead of calling out is an example of impulse control, you are correct, because you have to stop yourself from calling out the answer first. Answering the phone when it rings or pushing someone who is annoying you are automatic behaviors. If you do them, you are not controlling your impulse. Now we are going to think about using our brain skills to help us with self-control during social situations. Please pause the video and read your handout 9.1, Role Play 1. When you are done, press play. In Role Play 1, Student 1 had to use his brain skills to avoid a conflict and to ensure he did not miss his stop. It took all 3 brain skills working together to make this happen. First, he used impulse control to stop himself from getting into a dance competition and to avoid the impulse to respond when the other student said he looked like a fool. He also used shifting when he stopped the argument to pay attention to where his bus was. Finally, he used working memory to listen and then use the changes to the bus route to figure out where he needed to get off the bus. In this role play, the student did everything right. You can read the other 3 role plays in your free time. We've learned how working memory, shifting, and impulse control all help us with flexible thinking and having success in situations that require self-control. Now let's turn to the content questions in your iControl student workbook for Unit 1, Lesson 9. Pause the video while you complete the questions. When you are done, press play. For question 1, if you selected B, you are correct. Shifting means to think flexibly and to change how you were thinking about something. For question 2, if you selected C, you are correct. You are using working memory to hold many pieces of information in your mind at once. Thank you for taking the time to catch up on what you have missed in iControl. In the upcoming iControl lessons, we'll learn about the links between brain skills and self-control.